We've got a Patreon. You go to patreon.com/CU podcast. You open it up. You
put another nickel in.
You put the nickel in the Nickelodeon. You get the full video podcast every week. Almost instantly.
After the intro comes out.
I do a writing every week. I'm going to do a writing on Spelunky this week. Spelunky 2. It's fucking perfect.
What was your writing last week?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't.
I'll look it up.
Don't remember what my writing was last week. But yeah, I'm going to talk about Spelunky 2 this week, so I'll do that today or tomorrow.
And you vote on the Patreon.
You vote on a poll topic. What do we got here? Oh my! What are your favorite toy lines and why? At 31%.
Second place.
What video games would you make a novelization of and why? 30%. Tips for a new game store employee. 39%.
Ian, I will defer to you as the only game store employee on the podcast currently.
I'll take it away.
And plus, when the Funkoland turned down my employment application back in '97. So I was very heartbroken about that.
So I'm going to talk to you as if you are a game store employee at a place that's not GameStop. You can work at a GameStop, but GameStop is basically just another retail job.
Yeah, you have a list of stuff coming out. It's all there for you.
It's right there.
It's easier peasier.
However, when you're working in a game shop,
SHAWP,
that sells, stuff from all sorts of systems. One of the first things that I always recommend every new employee at Luna does is take a system that you don't know a lot about, go home, research it, look up 10 games, look up the top 10 games, look up the top 50 games, read into them, and know enough about the big titles on all systems that you can casually talk about them. This is something that you will eventually be able to do over time just by working there. But it's important to at least be able to recommend the popular titles for a system, even if it's not a system that you're particularly into.
So if I say, Ian, how do I learn about the Sega Saturn? What do you tell me?
I say you go home, you Google Sega Saturn, read about the release of the Sega Saturn, then Google top 10, 25 games on the Sega Saturn and go down the list. And you don't have to learn all of them. Pick the ones that are going to be interesting to you. Why? Because if they're interesting to you, you're more likely to remember them. You don't need to know everything, but that way if someone comes in and wants to talk about Sega Saturn games or Sega Saturn collecting, and they want to ask you questions about the games, you are likely to be able to answer some questions about that. Know a little bit about the import scene with Sega Saturn. Know that it's popular. TurboGrafx. Go home, look it up. Know about Bonk. Know a couple of shooters.
Look up a couple of Chris Bucci videos.
Turbo
Views.
Nintendo. If the original NES just was not your thing, or if you're just young and you don't know a lot about the NES, look up any of the Hidden Gems videos. Read up on that stuff. The other reason why you want to do this is not just so that you can talk to people about games, but when you get to the point where you're accepting trade-ins, you know what the valuable games are and you know what is popular.
But you have helpers. I mean, you have a helping system for that too. They look.
Yes, you do. But you should know. You should know off the top of your head, like what looks
Little
good.
Samson is big.
Yeah, because places have certain rules, and let's say, like for instance, at Luna, after 7 o'clock, we generally don't do trade-ins. We try to get everything cleaned up and ready for the next day between 7 and 8. But if someone comes in with a box of trade-ins and you glance at it and you see it has something like, say, a Little Samson in there, that's when you break the rules. So, you want to make sure...
It's a soft rule.
You want to make sure you're not going to be passing up on anything that's important. But at the same point in time, you don't want to accidentally lowball someone on something that is valuable that they might know the value of, because that is... Yeah, here it comes. I dread it. Because that's a good way to lose customers.
Sure. You don't want people to find out later, hey, he gave me $10 for a game worth $300.
Another thing that I would suggest to all new game store employees is learn to spot your bootlegs. Learn to spot your bootlegs real quick. There are all sorts of good articles that are thorough online. Especially the first thing you want to do is learn how to spot Pokemon bootlegs. Learn what the warning signs are. And you want to know it for Game Boy.
Do you have a visual guide? Do you have like a employee binder?
No, we don't
should have a
actually.
binder.
But I have websites that I send
You
to them.
you should have a certain NES guidebooks in there for reference to.
We do have one sitting there. I think it's there. Yeah, it's there. But especially with Pokemon, if you're working in a game store that sells classic stuff, Pokemon are always going to be coming in, and this is knowledge that you will use. I guarantee you, in your first month working at a game store, you will spot a bootleg Pokemon. And it's not just the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance cartridges. There's bootlegs of the DS games out there as well.
And since that's a popular game series, you're going to find those a lot.
And there are pretty good ways to be able to guaranteed spot the bootlegs. So you just need to know it. Hold the cartridges in your hands, realize that not all plastic is made equal and some of it feels different. You can feel the cheapness on the plastic in a lot of these bootlegs. So brush up on your systems, especially your classic stuff.
A lot of systems, remember.
That you have blind spots on.
I say like what, the most popular 10 systems or so for collectors? Like, don't worry as much about Atari.
No, you don't need to worry about Atari as much.
Fairchild.
But you definitely need to know your Nintendo systems. You need to know your Sega. 64, your GameCube, your Super Nintendo, your regular Nintendo. You need to know your Sega Genesis. Knowing Saturn and Dreamcast is good as well. You're not going to get too many questions on Master System. You don't have to worry too much about Atari.
Anything pre-NES is like, eh.
Yeah, anything pre-NES is generally not going to be a huge topic of conversation. But yeah, those are my two. Get your knowledge base up. But the bootlegs, it's one that I'm amazed at how often I'm like,
I think you need the binder with like real cart, fake cart. Just flip through.
Oh, we do keep bootlegs in the store on display, like in the back on display. So if you want to check it against something,
you should have like a little Dare drug thing where it's like, oh, here's the board with all the fake cards on it. You should actually like glue them up on the board.
I remember that.
That's what you should do.
So yeah, those would be my two big things. Slowly get you a lot of the stuff you will pick up if you're working. How
do you differentiate to people? I guess to me the biggest thing is the trading thing, because something might be rare that you might want for the store, but it might take you a huge amount of time to actually move it. Do you still then offer the same amount, or you go under? Do you do the half? Like what do you do? Like,
when you get to trade-ins, and that's different for most game store employees. That's not something, or at least at Luna, that's not something you're going to be worrying about for at least a few months. But yes, you do have to keep an eye on what moves fast and what moves slowly, and realize that a not rare game that moves very fast is okay to pay more money for. So, for instance, something like a Super Mario World, I'm going to move that very fast. So I will pay more for that than most people would think a store would pay for something that's as common as Super Mario World. We generally look at, trade-ins in terms of, it's about the basic way of doing it is about 50% of what you sell it for in credit, and about 50% that in cash. But that's
what percent cash?
50% of that again in cash, so 25%.
Okay,
that's your average rule of thumb. However, there are lots of times where I will pay 35% in cash and 65% in credit because I know it's going to move. It's not always great though to go after something that's super rare, like full-throated, and explain this to your customers. Don't lowball a customer, but if someone comes in with something that's very rare but you don't think is going to move immediately, say that when you're making your offer. Be like, look, you can get this. I know it's worth this. You can do this, but keep in mind that it's this because this goes for $300 or $400. This is going to be sitting on my shelf for a long, long time.
If it's like,
and the market is fickle, so we've seen, my example for something like this would be some of the PlayStation 2 horror games that currently go for a lot of money. The market is fickle, and while I don't expect something like Rule of Rose to ever plummet catastrophically in price, we have seen over time games that were once expensive become cheap again because more stock is found. This is something we talk about when we bring up the Heritage Auction stuff. A lot of stuff that is, PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox era, and later, you don't know, you have no idea how much more of that stuff is actually out there.
Let me give you a couple examples of this is where it gets weird for people. That some people think that because a game is expensive means it's also rare, means people want it. All three don't necessarily always match up.
Right.
So on the Intellivision, a game like Diner is hard to find. It's worth a little bit of money. But if Ian buys Diner and gives cash for it at half the value, not knowing that there might be one or two Intellivision collectors a year that might come in that might look for this. So I don't necessarily need to overspend for it, even buy it at all, if I think it's going to be on the shelf. Maybe it's nice to have it, but it may not move.
A good example is recently someone brought in some 5200 games.
Sure.
And all of them were the extremely common 5200 games, except they had Star Wars Arcade.
Which is a little bit harder to find.
Harder to find. Goes for about $35 online. I told the guy, hey, this goes for about $35 online. I said, I am not going to sell it for $35. I'm going to sell it for $3 because otherwise it will never, ever leave my store.
No one's going to look in the 5200 bin.
I am going to put I'm going to put it in the bin, $3 for any of these games, like all the 5200 games. I said, so if you want to hold on to this, you can probably make a little bit more on eBay. That person doesn't give a fuck. They're not going to put Star Wars Arcade up on. They're just clearing out space.
So it wasn't worth for you to even offer like $15 in credit because it's like, what's the point? That game might sit there forever.
No, if I did, Trey would look at it and be like, we're not charging $35 for this. This is going to be fucking in the store forever and ever and ever. Or someone might come in 2 years from now and go, fuck, I've been looking for that. And go, I know that's worth $35, and they're going to pay.
It's not worth spending out to have it.
Right. No one's going to do that. So he got $1 for it, which is actually a little bit more than I'd pay for a 5200 game on average. But I paid $1 for it and threw it in the bin. And it actually, about a month later, someone came in, saw it, and said, $3? I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh, that's a good deal. I'm like, I know, but if I had the right price, I asked them, I said, if I had $35 on this, I said, would you have bought it? Because they knew the value of it, and they were trying to replace 5200 games they had lost. I said, would you have bought this for $35? And he's like, probably not.
But what do you pay $10 on it?
Probably.
So I mean, like, you don't want to deal with the range of
right.
Things like that.
Right. No, we don't. Very rarely do we ever take any game for an early system like that and actually charge
any pre-NES system. It's because once you get NES is one of the only systems where if
we got a Hero for the 2600 in, I'd probably set that aside.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that goes for like 60. You know, once you
really? Wow.
At least it used to. Once you get above like 50, yeah, then I'm gonna start making some judgment calls, or we'll throw it on eBay.
Like,
but
chase the chuck wagon,
right?
Maybe
Mr. Boston
for the what? Whoa! I almost got a Mr. Boston in the deal. I want a Mr. Boston Vectrex out there if you have one. That's like one of the only like weird, hard to find games I actually want. Anyway, what was I gonna say? Yeah, the systems where there's only I'm trying to think of one outside the NES where the availability of a game matches up almost always with the price and how much people are looking for it. Most systems that doesn't happen. It's only for when you have all the completionists out there.
Well, you realized that a lot when you were writing a certain Super Nintendo guidebook and we were going over Rarity. There's a lot of rare and pretty uncommon games on the Super Nintendo that are not that it's not reflected in the price. And
people still in their head say, "Oh, it's worth money. It's rare." No, it has nothing to do with it.
If no one wants to buy it, it's not worth anything.
Yeah, I picked up a few because that looked like cool games. I'm like, wow, this game is very uncommon, but it's worth like only $20. So another example I have, Ian, is like Master System. Right? Not a lot of Master System people are going for every single game out there. So like Power Strike's a great example. Mail-in only game in North America. I think it was available in Europe, and it goes for $200. It used to be like a $50, $60 game. If that game comes in the store, you got to think about, okay, how many people are going to say, oh my God, there's Power Strike. I need to have that game, so it's worth you spending $100 to that customer in credit or cash.
What's the football game that's kind of rare?
Walter Payton.
Walter Payton.
It's like uncommon. I mean, but it's different scales though. It's Master System.
Right. I got Walter Payton in, and I was like, I know I can get $40 for this maybe, but we put it up for $5 and it's still there. Walter Payton's been there for fucking 3 years at $5 and no one buys it because it's rare.
And that's a game that a collector would know. That's a little uncommon. I'm going to get that.
Right.
That's $25 on okay. But that's a great example.
But it's a good, yes.
Because if that was an NES game,
any other game that would normally that I could sell for $25, I would probably be giving 12 in credit for, 15 in credit for, maybe 10 in cash, depending on how popular it is. I'm not paying anywhere near that for a copy of Walter Payton Football.
The Walter Payton equivalent on the NES would be like Dusty Diamond All-Star Softball or Baseball Stars 2, where it's a little bit hard to find, but it's a sports game. But those games will sell. If NES people, or even probably today, there are probably some people, maybe not as much to the same extent as a few years ago, but Dusty Diamond will sell.
Dusty
right?
Diamond will absolutely sell.
So there's different system things. What about, Ian, for how to deal with customers? Like, say I filled out the Luna Video Games application. Pat did that in alternate reality. And you said, okay, where did you work before? Well, I worked in a supermarket. I worked at Suncoast. Well, you say, okay, well, these are things you have to watch out for that people are shopping for video games versus buying broccoli. What would you tell me? What would be the tips that you would tell me there?
Basically just that, always be honest with them when they ask questions about games. If you don't like a game, do not pretend to like a game. 1, people can smell bullshit a mile away. 2, if people get to know you as a reliable employee who, is like giving them reliable advice, you'll be trusted. You'll go back to that store more often. You'll gain customers that way. So losing a $5 sale, say someone brings up 4 games and they're like, how are these? And you're like, actually, all these are good, but this one kind of sucks. They might put that back and you might lose $5 on the sale, but if that person trusts you, they're going to come back and spend more money. That's something that, I've learned over the years really does go a long way, is don't be an arbiter of taste. Don't insult someone's picks. But if they ask you,
they'll be like, well, you're picking up that game.
Right. Don't do that, because people hate that. But if people ask you for your opinion on it, give your opinion and give it honestly. People do want that. The main reason I shop at my favorite record store, M Theory, is because the first couple times I went there, I got into a good back and forth with the people behind the counter. They recommended me some good albums. We shot the shit. And now it's kind of the only place I go to buy records. And you can do that for the store that you work in as well.
So, but you're also running the risk, though, in some cases, that won't happen all the time, of, well, you may not make a sale of maybe a expensive game that's actually not good. Maybe they pick it up. I'm trying to think of a scenario where someone wouldn't know that a game is not good and want to buy it, and it's like $100 game. There's got to be some scenarios like, oh, there's Action 52. Wow, this game must be good. It's going for $200, $300.
Yeah,
but it's actually shit.
Honestly, that's not a situation you
not common. I get that.
You fall into very often. Most people who are going to be spending big money on games are aware that not all rarities are gold, and that lots of rare games are rare for a reason, because they weren't very good and they didn't sell.
Beat 'em and Eat 'em's not a great game.
I've actually never played Beat 'em and Eat 'em.
I got it sealed because there's a bunch of new old stock.
Yep, right
there
over
it is
there.
up there, along with Custer's Revenge.
New old stock.
New NOS.
NOS.
I wish they still had Classic Gaming Expo in Vegas. I wish that was still around. I mean, even the past 5 years, they didn't do it, because I was always like those old school Atari guys that had all the new shit. Like I told you about the guy who had all the folded Lynx, Atari Lynx boxes, brand new.
Oh, yeah.
And CD ones. I regret not buying those. I was like, wow, why do I need this for? Lynx is not, and the Jaguar is not worth anything. I say Lynx CD, Jaguar CD.
Right.
Those boxes tend to be worth money if you actually have a Jaguar CD box.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you don't have the foam, it's still worth money. People want that shit. But he had them stacked. All the Lynx stuff stacked. You can still get new old stock Lynx games. I can't imagine how many Lynx games they overproduce, because every single Lynx game, there's tons of sealed.
We had a very large box, a box so large that I would almost call it a crate of NOS Lynx games that sat in the back of Luna on Voltaire for like 2 years before Trigg finally just threw them up on auction and got like
$5 each, $10 each, whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, man, the experiment. We get into the WADA thingy and we corner the Lynx graded market.
Oh,
how much is your APB? Oh, it's 9.8 APB on Lynx, like California games. Oh, there's no box for California games, right?
But that is it. So check out the Patreon. Go to patreon.com/CU podcast. Exchange the money for the goods.
Or you can join us on YouTube. You can't vote. We got to figure out how to have voted on the Patreon topic on YouTube, but you can still get everything early, everything else, and get the little badges and emojis. And Ian Pixel Purple in the chat. Pixel Purple, Ian? No, the
purple popsicle.